There are seabird colonies that number in the millions. They leave so much guano behind that sailors over the last several hundred years are able to go to remote islands and do nothing but dig up bird poop and shove it onto their boats and bring it back to Europe to use as fertilizer. And that was a huge lucrative business. If they had found an untapped island full of poop, oh, they would have made so much money. Seabirds are amazing. Their taxonomy and the study of their relationships is also fascinating. This is something that's come to the attention lately because now that we've sequenced DNA from seabirds, well, some of the old stories of who's related to whom had to change. Hey, this is Dr. Rob. Welcome to Biblical Genetics. I'm reporting to you today from the west coast of New Zealand near a giant gannet colony. I thought we were going to come down here to look at the birds, but the first thing we did was we did a four-wheel drive trek down the beach, and then the guy set up some fishing poles and brought out a drone, and they're actually drone fishing. I've never seen this before. It makes sense to me, but this is something you couldn't have done 5 and 10 years ago. To use a drone, look for a fish in the ocean, and then drop the bait on the fish's head. Well, they're over there on the other side of the dunes. I had to come onto this side away from the wind with this very strange landscape behind me with these yellow flowers that I don't know what they are, and a bunch of dead trees and some underbrush, and I have to do a lot of studying here because all these plant species are new to me. Most of the fish species are new to me. The birds, I'd never seen these birds before. There are gannets in the northern hemisphere, the European gannet. There are gannets which I've also never seen in South Africa, but here is the Australian gannet, Morus cerator. Gannets are related to the boobies. I've seen boobies in the Galapagos Islands, specifically the red-footed booby, and I think the blue-footed booby. Might have gotten that confused with the brown booby, but I think it was the red and the blues that I saw, but that was 10 or 15 years ago. Can't wait to go back to the Galapagos someday. The boobies and the gannets belong to family Sulidae. This is a complicated family. In the fossil record, there are 12 or 13 extinct species, and sometimes it's hard to tell if it's a booby or a gannet because they kind of blend together in the fossil record. This is something that, when we're looking at it from a biblical perspective, we scratch our heads and saying, okay, where's the dividing line between this group and some other group? Are the cormorants included in this? Are the anhingas and the cormorants included in this group? Or is family Sulidae all by itself? Is it a created kind? This is something that we need to explore. Genetics helps. Morphology helps. But the old school, taking a bunch of bones of an animal, measuring its beak and its height and all those sorts of things and trying to classify them according to shape, all that was been thrown out recently because of genetics. In fact, the geneticists and the morphologists were at war for a good long while before the morphologists finally gave in and said, okay, genetics will tell us who's related to whom, in general. But being that Noah would have taken 7 pairs of all the different bird kinds on the ark, there's potentially a lot of variation in all the different bird groups. But amongst the Sulidae, there are 3 species of gannets and 5 or 6 species of boobies, including Abbott's booby, which is an outgroup. In fact, they're thinking that Abbott's booby is more related to some of the fossilized booby gannet type of birds that we see. So we have a diverse collection of species, hard to pin down, but they're amazing. Their nostrils are inside of their beak. Yeah, because when they do plunge diving, you don't want your nostrils to fill up with water, so they're actually in their mouth. That's crazy. So I just finished up a brand new book. Now, I haven't talked about it yet because it hasn't come out yet, but it's been sent to the printer, so it'll be out very soon. It's called Biblical Biology 101. In the middle section of that book, I go through all the different types of life and I try to describe them. I try to categorize them. But one of the things that I dealt with time and time again was that the old names that I learned are no longer valid because the geneticists have come in and turned taxonomy upside down. But also what I learned was that there's a huge diversity of animals in the past, in the fossil record, and only some of the diversity in the fossil record is represented today. Because, one, God created a lot of different types of each kind. So he could have created who knows how many shorebirds initially, not 2. He created 2 people. But shorebirds, he could have created millions of them, put them all over the world, all this different genetic diversity within them. And he could have created different kinds of shorebirds or all just one gigantic intermixing thing that speciated later on. We don't know. But the fossil record complicates that. Genetics complicates that. The more we learn about what God created, the more complex things become. Baraminology is the creationist idea of dividing things up into created kinds. Baramin, created kinds in Hebrew. But the Baramins are the created kinds God created, but he didn't tell us where the dividing line is. But when you look at life, clearly God created hierarchically. Clearly, some kinds are more similar than they are to other kinds. I mean, humans are more similar to chimpanzees than humans are to kangaroos. That's totally obvious. And so we have this hierarchical clustering of everything. And when you boil it down, well, taxonomy gets really complicated. And that's true for these birds as well. There's another bird, though, I want to talk about. It's the hoatzin, or the stink bird of South America. These birds are weird because they have functional wing claws. They also have a flat breastbone. All the other birds alive, they have a keel on their breastbone that attaches to the flight muscles, helping them to fly. But the hoatzin has a flat breastbone and wing claws like a lot of the birds we see in the fossil record. And then genetically, the hoatzin is different than all the other birds alive today. It's an outgroup. It's as if it's a surviving member of the types of birds we see buried with dinosaurs, like Archaeopteryx and Quetzalcoatlus and all sorts of other different types of birds we see, that most of them have flat breastbones and wing claws. Some of them have teeth, but they have feathers, they have wings. Some of them are birds, real birds. But I think the hoatzin is a holdover from that, and all the other birds that are alive today are in a different group. But we wouldn't know that except for genetics. So genetics is amazing. Genetics tells us all these fantastic things. Biblical genetics is fascinating because we're getting to look into the creative genius and creative mind of God, who created hierarchically, created with a great deal of complexity and diversity, and who created things to adapt and change over time. So almost all the evidence of evolution fits in with the biblical picture. It fits in with the biblical model. It fits in with creation. The idea that our genius creator God created things to adapt and change over time only adds fuel to the fire that creation fits what we see in the real world. But where the dividing line between these created kinds is really hard to figure out because they're not equidistant. Some things are more close to each other than they are to other things. But this family, this Sulidae family of shorebirds, the boobies and the gannets, are a created kind. We might have to lump in the cormorants and the anhingas and a few other birds too. I'm not sure, but this is something that some enterprising young creation scientists might want to pursue. Where are the dividing lines between these amazing birds that number in the millions? So for this episode, your takeaways are simple. 1, God created a lot of diversity. 2, God created things to adapt and change over time. 3, God created hierarchically. Those 3 things are at the core of what we call creationism, if you like. They should be at the core of Baraminology, but traditionally that has not been true, because the first idea in Baraminology was a thought that, if we study these things, we can find clear-cut boundaries between the different created kinds, and that hasn't really panned out because of the hierarchical nature of creation. Go look up my article on creation.com if you're interested, or look up some of my older episodes on biblical genetics, specifically Species Were Designed to Change. I also have an article series on creation.com, Species Were Designed to Change. There's a lot more information here. There's a lot more stuff we have to study. I want you all to dig in, sink your teeth into this, and maybe together we can come up with some new ideas that might help advance the ball further down the field. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all of my supporters. You are wonderful people. I love you all. If you like to support biblical genetics, there'll be a link in the show notes below. Have an awesome day. I'm going to go back to the beach now and watch them try to catch some fish. I think they're brewing up some tea on a pot on the sand. This is just an amazing day. It's actually my first day where I don't have an event here. I've done 20 events so far in New Zealand and in Australia. Actually, no, it's not true. Tonight I have an event. Almost every single day I've got a speaking event, sometimes more than one. Well, I'm really busy here, but I'm glad I had a time to come down to this unbelievable little cul-de-sac of sand dunes with these really cool plants and things and study these birds on this beautiful black volcanic beach.